In the tranquility of the night, some stories quietly come to life. Welcome to Hauntings and Horrors. Now, I will take you through a chilling tales. There's been a tornado warning for the past 3 days. I don't think what's outside is a tornado. I live in the Midwest and I won't say where. And that's irrelevant. But I live in an area that is prone to weather warnings. Specifically tornado hosa. And we mostly get them between April and June. But it's not too unusual to get them later in the year. What is usual, however, it is having them last for 3 days. It began 3 days ago. I had just gotten home from another boy day's work and I had plowed myself down on the couch with a beer. I microwaved dinner and my dog, Buddy, was a small rescue dog. I don't know her exact breed. I planned on getting a little drunk and then falling asleep to some shitty late-night TV, my usual weekday routine, when I was rudely interrupted by my TV in phone blasting and tornado warning. Looking outside, I could see that's him. It was a little stormy button and definitely didn't look like tornado weather sign A. I pulled myself off the couch and I took my dog and dinner down into the cellar below my house. I only realized after I closed the door that I forgot my beer. My cellar is just as glamorous as my house, and I'm sure you can imagine what that means. I'm walking down the steps. My hand made its way across the wall before finding the light switch. I knew that power would last long, so I began to warm up the generator. After that I double-checked. I had some food and water before sitting down to my old chair that I kept on here, and I switched on my radio and I figured I would at least get a half an hour of radio signal before it was distorted and eventually washed away by the storm. And while I began finishing my dinner in the radio crackle life emergency weather alerts broadcast for Sumner County, Kansas. The residents are advised to stay indoors, air and a storm cellar and shut all windows. Residents are also advised to lock all doors, barricade cellar entrances, and not to answer any call for help or request for entry until an official signal. Stay safe and good luck. Wait, when I saw the bolting uprights and almost choking on my food, I quickly leaned forward and turned off the radio volume. We're hoping hits the warning for a second time. Residents are also advised to lock all doors, other entrances, and to not answer any call for help or request for entry until an official signal law. Stay safe and good. The radio had finally caught Alton, just as rain began to pelt the roof of the rest of the upstairs. No matter, and I heard it again for so tender, lock all doors, barricade cellar entrances, and not to answer any call for help or request for entry until an official signal. It had played again in my head. Oh, don't get me wrong. And this isn't my first rodeo. When it comes to big storms or tornadoes, I spend countless hours holed up in the here while rain, lightning and tornadoes and hail wreak havoc above me. But never in my life had it been told that I needed to lock my doors or not to answer any call for help or request for entry. That was weird. Initially I pleaded office there possibly being looters who would enter the homes of hiding people and rob them. It's happened before, but never during the storm, and never to such an extent to where the county would warn about it. Besides, the looters don't try to alert homeowners to the present in any way. I tried my best to not think about it, and eventually I drifted off to sleep much earlier than I would have Bradley do to bored Donner, and with nothing to do other than now listen into the pelting rain above you. It's pretty hard to stay away. I was awoken around 3 a.m. Buddy barking and growling at this other door. It was weird. She never barked in storms, only if people at the door or some other dogs. I walked up the stairs under. I rested my ears against the cellar door. All I could hear was the heavy rain and occasionally some thunder. It was weird. The tornado should have passed by now, but we still didn't get an official say. No, it's not like I would have slept through it behind a light sleeper, and I made sure the radio volume was up really high. Just as I was about to go back to my chair, I hear the creak of my front door opening. I thought to myself I forgot to lock it. Buddy started barking louder and then, despite my attempts to shoot sure the house was quiet for a moment, I used this time to stick a wooden board between the door handle, making the door almost impossible to open from the outside. But then I heard footsteps. They were light but definitely there. I followed them with my ears as they made their way around my house. It was hard to pinpoint where they were, but I definitely heard them in my living room, on the carpet and going up the stairs and into my bedroll. My eyes rushed around the room as my panic rose. I felt like there was a pit to my stomach. I was nauseated with fear. I have left my rifle upstairs and down here. The best excuse for a weapon was the couple-of-inch-long steak knife that I brought down before I switched off the southern light, which I had stupidly left on before, and I stuck my eye in between the two southern doors that opened out into my house. Buddy had quieted down but was still growing her my. I glanced around the limited field of view that it had. I could see my couch stairs and closed door to my bathroom, so not too much. It was then that I noticed that the footsteps had stopped. Was this what the radio had warned about? I thought over all the scenarios. I had a looter here, someone seeking shelter, a wild animal. Maybe none of it made sense. And then there was the knock. I wasn't sure if I had heard it properly at first, but it quickly progressed from a quiet tapping it into a banging crescendo. It sounded like the housings of fists had descended out my cellar door, thrashing and pounding against engine. Whatever was banging. I knew I couldn't let in. This must have been what the radio had warned about. Instinctively, I jumped back and I nearly fell backwards down the stairs, leading into my cellar, surprising me. But I composed myself and I yelled at whatever was out there, "Get out of my house. I'm armed." I shouted it. I don't think it was too convincing, probably thanks to the slight tremble in my voice. The banging on my door stopped, and did I scare it away? I thought to myself it was quiet for a few minutes, but the uneasy silence was shattered when it spoke. "Hey man, you need to let me. All I that's really dangerous out here. I don't know how long I can last. Impossible." It was the voice of my brother. I hadn't seen him in years and not since he moved to the West Coast. There is no possible way that he was in the state. How he didn't even know where I lived. Every ounce that might be knew that the whatever spoke was definitely not my brother but something else. And yet I still replied, "What? Yeah, it's been a while. Let me in. I need to see you." And at the end of its sentence that voice trailed. Often it was deeper, almost raspy. Yeah, not the voice of my brother at all. I knew I couldn't respond. It spoke again. Look, Alec, for the love of God, let me. It's dangerous out here. The storm is strong." I didn't give it the satisfaction of a reply, which only seemed to make it more angry. "Let me in." It screamed out frustration. Its scream was sickening. A high-pitched wail that filled the air and made me want to throw up. After that it started banging on the door. "Jenna." It was quiet for a couple of hours after the head ZA. The storm continued too, seemingly without a tornado. However, I was startled to hear my radio crackles live. "Emergency weather alert canceled. Residents are advised to leave their cellars to secure properties." That is all. I let out a sigh of relief. However, my relief was short-lived. The broadcast seemed often usually at the end of a storm, and there would be a damage report in locations where you could go to receive aid and even maybe a bed for the night. Plus I could still hear the rain and thunder above me. There is no way a signal could get through. It must have somehow hijacked my radio signal, even though I didn't give any response to the message. My radio continued to say that I could leave with it. Every few minutes, the Buddy E line would be repeated with perfect sound quality. It was enough to make me want to unplug the thing altogether if I wasn't afraid of missing the actual end signal. Since all of that, it's been rather quiet. 3 days have passed without the storm. Were my radio subsiding that thing whatever? It is still out there, occasionally banging on my door to remind me I'm at my wit's end. If it wasn't for Buddy, I think I would have gone insane by now. That's all for the moment. I'll update if I can. Until then, wish me luck. It's the eve of the 4th day now and the storm is enjoying any signs of stopping. Not from what I could hear anyway. Reading through my last update, a lot of you gave me some really good advice that I ended up putting into action. And I managed to get a few little chunks of sleep over the past few days. It's hard. But that thing in my house occasionally bangs on the door and calls for me to open it. And my freaking radio's blast in the buddy message when I have not been asleep. However, now I've been digging out the back of the cellar. You see, and when I first bought this house, the previous owner told me that there is a cellar door that opened to the outside. But it was buried under a pile of rubble after the walls on either side, with the cellar collapsed. It was strange by it. I think it might be my only hope. In my last post, I usually recommended that I should try and call one of my neighbors. I have a landline stored down here, so I tried to give them a ring for the first few calls. I got no response. I assumed that they had either evacuated her. It was stored inside of their house. I was ready to give up on that thing. Outside of my freaking door spoke. Pagana, you're not going to get through to that. I can help. Let me in. I will help you. I have food and water. Food and water. Thank God that wasn't an issue. I even had a couple sacks of dog food for Buddy, and so she wouldn't go hungry. Buddy actually seemed to enjoy the situation when she wasn't barking at the thing outside the door. Also, someone in my last post made a comment about Buddy using the dog as a distraction while I run for answer. While the idea is definitely valid, I'm afraid that I couldn't do that to Buddy. She's been with me through thick and thin, even though my cellar is a bit to crap. I still kept it constantly stocked with supplies for these exact situations. Well, maybe not this exact situation, but one way I'd have to stay down here for a few days anyway. I tried one last time to call my neighbors this time. Thank God they actually digged up below. Mr. Robinson, I try not to sound as shaky on the phone. Do you need help? Pasta. I couldn't tell them about what was outside of my door. They wouldn't believe me, and probably just telling me to screw off one. Mr. Robinson would come over and potentially risk his life by initiating contact with that thing. Yeah. I'm in a bit of a spot. I'm running out of food and water and my generator's broken. Would it be alright if I stayed with you guys until the storm's out? Yes, I think that would be okay. We still have plenty of supplies. So come out over here. Just knock on the door around the back of the house and we'll let you. Yeah. Alright. Thanks. And see you that I hung up and I prayed to God that I just spoke it to Mr. Robinson and not whatever the hell was out there. I had a hunch that I was safe going over there. And because if this was the thing that had picked up the fauna, I think it would have been much more keen for me to gala, and despite its incredible ability to change its voice, subtlety is something that it lacked in the time between these poses. I've also done some research on what it is. A commenter on my last post said that it could have been a way to go. I'll be honest, I've never heard of the thing outside of a couple of horror stories. And it says on the Wikipedia page that it's a man-eating creature that has some human characteristics. But it also resides in the forest regions of the East Coast and Great Lakes. So I don't know if one could get all the way down to Kansas. Although I don't quite know what it is. I know that I don't want to come into contact with it. And before I made a mad dash into my neighbor's yard, I had to work out how to distract the thing. Luckily, I still knew that it was right about me due to its constantly banging on the door. Looking through the crack in between the two doors, I still couldn't see anything, despite the constant banging. I'll be honest, I'm kind of thankful for that too. I think I would have a heart attack if I looked out and saw an eyeball looking back at me or something like that. I knew where it was, though, and that was the main thing for the rest of the fourth day. I used a Smolson shovel to dig out the back of the cellar, even though the weather outside was stormy. The digging left me sweaty and thirsty, and thus, Walter in Kansas heat. The work was hard, and, especially with my limited equipment, most of what I dug up was just dirt. However, there were bits of rubble from what I assumed was parts of the walls that had caved in. Despite the mud from the leaking ceiling and my shovel breaking, I eventually managed to dig out the backside of the cellar by about 6 p.m. Now I just had to figure out a way to distract the creature and get me and Buddy into my neighbor's cellar without being found by the thing. I spent the next half an hour setting up and gathering the materials for my plan. And then I gave Buddy some dinner, and I made myself some minute noodles. In 59 seconds I was in a rush to get out on my plan. as quietly as I could. I replaced the board between the cellar doors with an old bit of wood that I dug up that was weak in the center. I attached a bit of survivor up to attain a loop around the weakest point, and then I packed my backpack with a bit of food, water, and batteries. On top of all that I packed in Buddy. Luckily she was quite small, and then, with a rope on one hand, took my knife in the other. I made my way over to the recently excavated outside door, and I prepared to make a run for her. "All right, come on in," I screamed at the top of my lungs before swinging the outside cellar doors open, and without looking back, I made a run for it. I sprinted across the dry grass in my yard, and I leapt over the poorly maintained hedge into my neighbors before banging on their cellar door and screaming for them to let me in. Mrs. Robinson opened the doors and assured me, Anna, come in. Come in, Inns. You're already drenched standing out there." I jumped down into the cellar, and I was shocked to find that's it. There is no light. It was almost pitch black inside. "Oh, Alec, you finally arrived. Mr. Robinson's. I'd always glad to have visitor here. Sir, sorry. It's a bit dark. Our generator died about an hour ago. It's fine. Really better than being out of food," I replied, just glad to be away from that thing. Yeah, I bet. Anyway, when was the last time that you saw your brother?" "Mark, what do you mean?" "Oh, he popped in a moment ago. He was looking, wondering where you were." I started to sweat, my adrenaline up and pumping again after a brief calm period. Hello, you. The stories have been told, but their shadows will continue to haunt our minds. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Hauntings and Horrors. Turn on notifications so you won't miss any thrilling horror stories. Good night, and sweet dreams.